Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. We have a great speaker, Eliza Erickson, that we're going to, I'm sure you're all excited to hear. But before she comes on, I just want to orient you if you haven't been here before. My name is Jeff DeMasi. I'm with the IEI, which is the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Institute. And I'm also a professor of management focused on entrepreneurship, innovation, and strategy. You're here in the accelerator of the IEI, and over here to your left is the Creativity Lab. This is part of the entrepreneurship ecosystem here at Temple. We have many ways in which you can engage with us. You can, of course, take classes if you're here at Temple as undergrad or in the graduate level. There's also, we have pitch competitions. So if you have ideas for businesses and you're part of the Temple community, whether you're a student, staff member, faculty, alum, at any point you can apply to the pitch. You can enter a pitch competition. We do one in the fall and one in the spring. The one in the fall is for earlier ideas, innovative ideas, and that you can win in the couple $1,000 range. And then the one in the spring, which is happening very soon, the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, which we're in the process of doing workshops for, so watch out for those. You can win up to $50,000. So that's a non-dilutive capital way to move your business forward. So something to pay attention to at any point while you're, even if you're an alum many years out. So we also have a pool of mentors who can work with you and advise you, and many other workshops throughout the year that will help you along your way as an entrepreneur. So feel free to reach out to myself, Alan in the back there as well, if you want to chat with him while you're here. So just something to pay attention to. So, but before we bring on Eliza, I want to bring up Katie from Technically, who is our media partner.
Hello, thanks, Jeff. Hi, I'm Katie. I'm National and Market Editor over at Technically, and we're huge followers of the impact that Eliza has had on both local and state government. We cover all facets of innovation, how to get ideas, where to connect in the community to make those come to life, economic impact, believing in a paywall-free approach to keep news and information accessible. I know Eliza has really great things to say on all of the above as a member of our Readers Council and a 2025 Technically Award nominee. And incredibly grateful that she's taking the time to spread that knowledge tonight. We featured her career journey last year as a part of our How I Got Here series, which about what brought her to government work and why she believes so strongly in its potential. I encourage you all to dig that up after this talk and learn a little bit more about her. And if you don't want to miss the next one, you can sign up for our newsletters at technical.ly/subscribe. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Katie. And so we're excited to have Eliza here. As I said, she is currently the director of, I got to read this, Permit, License, and Certification Innovation in the Office of Governor Josh Shapiro, which sounds like a lot, but really excited to have you here to talk about this. For those of you who are in my open innovation class at any point, we never really talked about government accelerators, so this is an opportunity to really hear about that perspective, what can happen inside government in terms of innovation. Eliza also worked for the city of Philadelphia as the director of innovation and strategy and built out a very well-known people, place, and process model and managed the Innovation Academy Lab and Fund. So really excited to have Eliza here tonight. Please help me welcome her up front.
That was like a really big intro. I hope this is good. I'm really excited to be here. I think kind of like what Jeff alluded to, I think there are a lot of conversations that happen in a lot of different spaces about innovation, whatever that means. And government and the public sector, I think, is not often, we're not like the first invited to the table to be a part of those conversations. And I think for some folks in the room here, I am like the squeaky wheel that is always like, oh, you're having a conference and it's about innovation. Is there anyone from the public sector who's going to be there? So I think I'm really excited that I'm able to be here and talk to you a little bit. My style, and I think really my hope for this conversation is just that this really ends up being a conversation. There is an official slide at the end that says, do you have any questions for me? But please feel free to kind of engage and ask questions as we're moving through this if you are so inclined. I have light audience participation as well. So I think we're going to kind of be talking about building a culture of innovation inside government. Like I said, we're not often seen as the world's most innovative sector. We have a lot of challenges that I think make doing this work hard and also really unique. And I do kind of believe if we can do it, lots of other people can do it too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my work at the state, kind of connected to my work at the city, talk a fair bit about kind of two versions of kind of an accelerator that I've run both at the city and the state level, some lessons learned. I probably should go to this slide, which is basically just what I'm saying right now. A little bit of just kind of things that I think are helpful to keep in mind when you're thinking about building a culture of innovation. And then, like I said, what questions do you have for me? So before I go to the next slide, when you guys think of innovation, what are words that come to mind? Creativity, new, improvements, future, analysis. That's a great one. Change. I'm sorry, say that one more time. Different. Okay. Experimental. Let's do like one more. Connection. Okay, great. Those are not terribly far off from what I think public sector innovation means. Sometimes when I give a version of this talk and ask what people think innovation is, we get a lot more emphasis around like, it's a new widget, it's a new app, it's a new piece of technology, it's like something that's bright and shiny and has never been done before. That is more often than not what public sector innovation is. I have a lot of anecdotes about government systems that still operate on fax machines. So like when that is your starting point, like something like a new fancy widget that does X, Y, and Z is like very far in the future. So I think it's important to just level set a little bit around what I think public sector innovation is. We're talking about things like process improvement, culture change, increased efficiency, modernization, transparency, employee engagement. I think it focuses much more on these small incremental tweaks that I think result in really big impact for both internal and external users, but more often than not are not like bright, shiny, new things. That's just not what government is kind of in the business of doing. My framing for how I think about government innovation is really rooted in this, I don't know, this narrative that I'll call people, place, process. He is not in the room tonight, but I would be remiss if I did not credit my mentor and friend, Andrew Buss, who was the first director of innovation at the city of Philadelphia. We kind of co-designed this together, but he gets a lot of credit for thinking about the people, place, process model that has totally shaped the way I think about this work. And really what Andrew and I talked about, this was back in 2014, government innovation was a really new phenomenon. And we were thinking about what does it look like to launch an innovation function inside government. We really kind of tried to break it down into things that felt really approachable and actionable. And we came up with this idea that if you want to have an innovative ecosystem, you need to have people who know how to think innovatively about ideas. You need to have places that facilitate innovation and I think really create physical ways for people to be creative and have conversations and engage with each other differently. And you need to have processes that allow you to not only kind of solicit and seed innovation, like figure out how are you getting innovative ideas, but also implement, scale, evaluate, and then replicate those new innovations. So quick kind of like high points around things I've worked on that I think fall into each one of those buckets. The Permit Accelerator is a program that I currently run at the state level. I'm not going to talk about that very much right now because that's what the whole next chunk of this is about. The Innovation Lab opened in 2014. It is on the 16th floor of the Municipal Services Building, which is the building in Center City that used to have the Frank Rizzo statue in front of it and the chess pieces in front of it. It's a major municipal building. So in 2014, we renovated the penthouse. I say that lightly. We renovated the top floor, knocked down a wall in between two conference rooms, and kind of created this space, which now like looks very similar, I think, to kind of a vibe of a place like this. But in 2014, this was incredibly cutting edge. You just have to trust me. And it was government. Like government did not at the time have rooms, I kid you not, with like movable tables. Like, oh, there's a group of 4 people that want to have a conversation and you don't want to sit across this like oak paneled room with like lounge chair. Like that doesn't make me feel creative. So we built the Innovation Lab. We had flat screen monitors. We painted this mural on the wall. And it was really meant to be a city co-working space. And the vibe behind the Innovation Lab was, if we want to create a culture where people from all different departments are coming together and are thinking freely and creatively, like, let's build a space that meets them where they're at. So that's our place. I think places is an interesting component of this now because our relationship to physical spaces is so different. We can talk more about that later. But remember, this was a long time ago. Okay, process. The example I pulled for process is something else that's related to my current job. I am the director of permit license and certification. There's actually a middle part in the Office of Transformation and Opportunity in the Office of Governor Josh Shapiro. So it's even longer than what Jeff initially said. And OTO is an office that is charged with basically making it easier to do business in Pennsylvania. A big component of what that means is fixing permit systems across the Commonwealth for permits that are just really, really difficult to get. Thorny bureaucratic processes involve different agencies who need to coordinate with each other, takes forever, pain in the butt, no one wants to do them, et cetera, et cetera. So Shapiro built OTO and he said, basically fix all of these things. So my sliver of that is permit reform. It sounds very obvious, but if you want to show and improve that you are processing a permit faster, you need to measure how fast you are actually processing that permit. And that's something that had never existed at the state level before. So one of the first things that we did in OTO was build this thing called the PLC catalog, which is a comprehensive database of every single permit, license, and certification issued by every single state agency that falls under the governor's jurisdiction, which is about 23 different agencies. We collect copious amounts of data around, at this point now, more than 2,800 permits, licenses, and certifications that are issued across the state. We capture information like average processing time, average completion time, how many applications were processed each year. Is this a paper application? Does this involve third-party reviews? There's a lot of boring stuff that we ask a lot of questions about. And this is the first year that we have publicly published some of that data. So you can go onto the OTO website, you can look up all these permits and see some of that information about how agencies are processing them. I wanted to highlight this as kind of the process component of people, place, process, because this is something that we designed 3 years ago. We've now iterated on it year after year as we've kind of refined the challenges and the opportunities associated with the PLC catalog. And it was something that truly had never been done before. And I think thinking about how do you build a process around something so massive that now is being replicated year after year, and also, you know, other states want to adopt something very similar, is like a very important, if not boring, really impactful innovation that I think is an important part of this story. That was a lot of talking. Does anyone have any questions about anything that's on this slide in the spirit of conversation? Great. Okay, so now I want to jump into, I think, kind of what I'll call a case study. I know you all are thinking and doing a lot around accelerators, and I have been lucky enough to kind of run 2 of them in the public sector. So the first thing I'll talk about is something called the Innovation Academy. This is a program that we ran at the City of Philadelphia. By the time I left my role, we had run our 9th cohort of the program, and it is still in existence. And I left about 2.5 years ago. So let's say we've done 12 iterations of the program so far. The Innovation Academy is an 8-week class that we, the city, built in partnership with Jefferson University in Philadelphia to select cohorts of city employees from across all agencies to learn kind of what we call the principles of innovation. So thinking about things like human-centered design, design thinking, stakeholder engagement, survey methods, some leadership development stuff, really all in the vein of training employees to think differently about how they do their work. So remember, this is the people component. So if you want to be innovative, you have to have people that know what it means and how to be innovative. Did you want to ask something? Oh, sorry. I ruined the system by doing.
My boss will yell at me if I don't give the mics out.
Fair. I was just going to ask, because since the Innovation Academy is open to all of the employees, you said, of the 24 agencies you guys look after. So is it just kind of like universal skills that you guys teach to those employees so they can advance in whatever aspect they are in within the departments?
Yeah, basically. So the PLC catalog is an initiative that comes out of the state level. This version of the Innovation Academy happened at the city level. So, but totally same vibe. So it was open to any employee at any level from any department who was interested in going through this program. And yes, the goal is basically to teach what I would consider universal innovation skills, that whether you are in the Office of Children and Families or the Office of Innovation and Technology or the Department of Revenue, you could go through this cohort, you could learn how to think differently about solving problems. You would be in this community of other folks who cared about learning these things and being a part of what we ended up calling this network of innovators. And you could go back once the Innovation Academy was over, you'd go back to your home department and you would infiltrate the system with new ways of thinking. So the content really focused on those things I talked about, wasn't connected to any specific topic. And really the goal was learning for the sake of learning and create a community of interested and invested employees across city government who wanted to learn these skills and really wanted to then do something with them. I loved the Innovation Academy. I mean, I built it. I'm a little bit biased, but I thought it was great. And when I was hired at the state, I was really excited to bring a similar program to the state level. We made a few tweaks, which I will talk about on the next slide, but an overview of what this program is. It's called the Permit Accelerator. So we bumped from 8 weeks to 10 weeks, but same idea. It was an in-person 10-week program where we taught folks some very similar content to what we covered in the Innovation Academy. This time we co-designed with Penn State University Harrisburg, which is obviously out in Harrisburg. One of the main differences between the Permit Accelerator and the Innovation Academy was, while the goal of the Innovation Academy was, I think for lack of a better term, to get people learning for the sake of learning and to kind of build this community of practice among city employees, the goal of the Permit Accelerator was to take state employees that were invested in some component of their agency's permitting processes have them go through this program in a little bit more of a team model, design a pilot program that addressed some permit challenge that they were facing, make a final pitch to Commonwealth leadership, and then have that pilot program funded up to $20,000 by my office, by OTO. So again, some of this is driven also by the fact that OTO is hyper focused on economic development and permit reform. So it made sense that if we were going to run a program like this, it was going to focus on one of those things. So I learned a lot over the years that I ran the Innovation Academy, and it was really exciting for me to have the opportunity to kind of redevelop and rebuild this program from the ground up at the state level using what I had learned and really kind of trying to address some of the challenges that came up when I was running the Innovation Academy. So the first challenge that came up in the Innovation Academy that I think like really had an impact on the program was in each one of those 8 weeks, each one of those weeks was a different topic, and we would bring in different professors or guest lecturers to teach a given week's content. And I think what ended up happening some, if not most of the time, was a professor would teach week 4. They wouldn't have a clear understanding of what happened on week 3 and what was happening in week 5. And the content started to feel a little bit disconnected from like a more holistic class. So that was the first thing I wanted to address. My solution to that was to really kind of embed myself in the planning process with Penn State Harrisburg, to kind of have this like utopian, I'm sure you can tell by the way I just phrased that maybe this didn't go the way I thought. But really to kind of, I went in with the best of intentions, really thinking that I was going to be able to meet every professor ahead of time, every guest lecturer before they gave their session. We also had a bit of a different working relationship with Harrisburg than what I had with Jefferson University, where we had really one very consistent Harrisburg professor who was at every session, as well as a lot of administrative support at a level that was different than what we had at Jefferson University. So I went into the planning process feeling like, all right, I've addressed this first challenge. The second challenge in the Innovation Academy was it was a fully open program. Anyone at any level in any role could apply for it. And at the time, there were about 27,000 City of Philadelphia employees. And we really wanted everyone to feel like they had a voice. We did this massive application process. The program was pretty competitive. But we saw pretty consistently that 2 things were emerging. The first one was that there were some agencies that kind of year after year just did not express interest in wanting to go through the program. And conversely, there were other agencies that like every year wanted to have 20 people go through it. And when someone went through the program and they were the only person from their agency, they had a much different experience than when someone went through the program and there were 2 or 3 other people from their agency who went through it with them. So my solution in the accelerator, we did 3 main things. The first one was there are some really high impact permits that come out of the state that we really wanted to make sure we had representatives from those agencies in the accelerator. So we did hyper targeted outreach to the agencies that we cared about. The second thing what we did was we switched kind of from an open application model to a bit of a nomination model. So I connected with agency leadership, told them about the program, said, can you give me, the names of a few folks that you think would be really interested in this? And then I did kind of a second level of outreach so that, again, we just felt like everything was much more controlled around who was participating in the Permit Accelerator. And the third thing we did was I switched to this team model. So instead of saying everyone could just like individually go through this program, maybe as an island, come to the table as part of a project team so that you are basically guaranteed to have at least one partner in crime kind of go through this with you, build your pilot project, et cetera. The third challenge really was that because we wanted the Innovation Academy to just be this learning experience and to be this area, this space where people were coming together and learning these new skills, we purposefully didn't really connect it to any sort of outcome. So it was like, go through this class. If you love it, that's amazing. Like, stay connected to the innovation work. If you don't love it, thanks for playing. Like, see ya. And I'll mention both of these programs have a cost associated with them. We did pay both universities to kind of be our implementing partners here. So we had both at the city level and at the state level, we have some skin in the game to make sure that like people are getting good stuff out of these programs. And we kind of lost it, I think, with the Innovation Academy. So in the Permit Accelerator, I set really clear expectations that participants would be expected to kind of build out these pilot programs, make these pitches to senior leadership, and that they would be getting this funding. And we really thought that that would add a level of like cachet to the program. We felt like if people knew at the end of it, they had to make a presentation to the governor, that they would take it really seriously, and that there would be this level of accountability kind of around like, oh, like I like committed to doing this thing, now I'm gonna follow through. Were we successful? Kind of. That was the best word I could come up with. Are there any questions about the structure or anything of either the Innovation Academy or the Permit Accelerator before I start talking here? Okay, great. I'm just doing such an excellent explanation job. Okay, so the first challenge, this idea of wanting to have session and of addressing session and instructor inconsistencies. I don't think we didn't do the best job here. Schedules changed. There was some staff turnover at Penn State. I think my plans of wanting to be able to meet with every guest lecturer like pretty quickly went out the window. I think for nobody's fault, except for the fact that like it just from a coordination standpoint, it just kind of didn't work. We did have very consistent. We had a few very consistent Harrisburg. We were able to land the plane on the consistent Harrisburg, one professor in each class. That was super helpful. I am convinced that like the solution to this, it's the same solution. It's just me doing better is part of it. Okay, challenge 2, this idea of under representation of agencies. So we had this idea of doing more targeted outreach. I think we were pretty successful in that. I think people do respond really well to specific engagement. People feel special when you're like, hey, you were nominated by your deputy secretary to go through this program. Like that side of it worked really well. The team component of it did not go as well as I anticipated. I think what ended up happening was we got a lot of folks nominated from the same agency, but who were not connected to each other. And the state is really, really big, which sounds super obvious, but like I cannot overstate how many people work at the state level. So, you know, even though we might have had 5 people from DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, those 5 people probably do not know each other. And so even though they're under the same umbrella, it really wasn't like they were going, oh, sorry, I'm drifting. It really wasn't like they were going through this program together. So I think we need to do a little bit of a better job there. The second thing that I didn't explicitly mention this, but I was really surprised by was I believe in this work so much. And I was like, people are going to go gangbusters for the Permit Accelerator. Like, who is not going to want to do this? When I tell you we tried to get people to do the first cohort, I mean, I could have been asking people to like walk across a desert with no water. Like the response I got was cricket. And I think I really took for granted, you know, having 9 years of experience in another setting and knowing how successful a program like this could be. I was expecting to have folks kind of like we were going to be inundated with teams that wanted to go through this program. And that just wasn't the case. So I think like thinking about how you tell the narrative of this was also really, really important for me. The other thing we ended up kind of having to do in the moment was like flexing that team model. Like we didn't get the teams that we thought we were going to get, so we had to just kind of pivot. Ironically, back to like a more individual model, which was what we were trying to avoid in the first place. But you got to work with what you have. So I think year 3, like we continue to work with leadership level. And I think we also maybe lessen the team requirement. Say if you're a team, great. If you're an individual, great. And that's kind of what we did in this year's program. This one was also like pretty hard. So we did have basically every participant who went through the program did design a pilot, and they did make really, really excellent pitches to Commonwealth government. I think the place where we are still trying to figure out the right mechanism is getting those programs funded and getting the pilots implemented. Some challenges were really beyond our control. You may or may not have heard that Pennsylvania did not have a state budget for a very long time. Which makes it really difficult to do things that involve funding. So a few projects, for example, from the first cohort that might have been ready for funding, we kind of had to put on hold because no one could write checks. I think the second thing we saw was people's priorities really changed. So, you go through something like the Permit Accelerator, you're super jazzed about the pilot you build, and then you get back to your day-to-day work and you're like, well, shit, like I don't have time. Like, I got to like do my actual job. I can't like super focus on building this pilot. And I think ironically, we lost the emphasis on building this network of innovators. So while we leaned real hard into building the pilots, we leaned real away from, I think, helping participants understand and really internalize the skills they were learning and kind of recognize that we wanted them to be a part of this broader culture change. So a lot of lessons learned. I think some things we did well, some things we have a lot of room for improvement for. I wanted to take a pause and say, now that you've heard about both of these programs, we will be doing a third cohort of the Permit Accelerator. So do y'all have any thoughts about things that maybe we could try to either address the challenges that I mentioned or other questions, concerns you think might come up in running a program like this?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So how long did it take you to identify the problems in like the 3 problems that you showed us? How long did it take to identify? Like, did you gather data first and then like identify a pattern, or was it more of an observation and then you confided in your team and you guys kept a lookout for that?
Yeah, great question. Those, you mean to come up with these challenges? These I just observed in my own head. But your point is super well taken, that one of the principles that we talk about in the Innovation Academy and in the Permit Accelerator is really, how do you identify problems and how do you make sure you're solving for the right thing? And I think that 100%, like some of these, if I did a deep dive, for example, into the limited accountability of participants staying engaged post-program, I have my hypotheses around why that happens. But if I did stakeholder interviews and, did some empathy mapping with folks who have gone through the program, I would have real outcomes to back that up so that I know, I'm able to design, like in year 3, I'm able to make tweaks that solve the right problem, not just what I have observed in my head. Yeah. No, go ahead.
My second question was like, I was just a little confused for challenge 3. So the pilot programs the pilot assignment was designed to make the participants engaged in the Permit Accelerator.
Yeah, so the goal was, if going through this program, you are going to be designing a pilot program You're going to be pitching that pilot program to the state's budget director and the state's policy director. And you have the opportunity to get $20,000 to launch your pilot. You're going to be more involved in the program, as opposed to someone that's just going through the program to like learn because it sounds interesting. And then you graduate and we're like, that was fun.
Wait, so when you said it backfired, did it end up like when participants were creating the pilot, in a way, did they like lose motivation to still keep doing it and to be engaged?
Yeah,
with the
I think
program
so.
afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think what ended up happening was over the course of the 10 weeks, people were really excited about building their pilots. They were really excited about making the final pitches. And then I think the class ended. They got back into their real jobs, and things that feel extra, you know, are the first things that get moved to the bottom of your to-do list. You know, they become like nice to haves instead of like, well, I have all these other core functions in my portfolio to work on. I don't have time anymore to work on this pilot program out of the permit accelerator. Yeah. Yeah. They built the pilot over the course of the 10 weeks. And then the goal was, okay, you're going to make a pitch about what your pilot program is. You're going to continue to work on that pilot program, and then we're going to give you $20,000 to implement it. So there were maybe 1 or 2 programs that at the end of the 10 weeks were like, we're ready for funding. Sometimes that was because they had come to the program with like an idea a little bit more fully baked. Sometimes it was because it was something that they were already working on, that maybe their agency said, if you can find additional funding for this, we can implement it. You know, they were closer to implementation, but there were some that at the end of the 10 weeks were like, we need another 6 months to like build out our prototype and be ready for funding. And I think those were the ones that have fallen off a little bit.
I had a question back here. So there was something I noticed when you were talking about the city and the state program on those slides that I wanted to return to, because I figure either there's an interesting rationale or a good story. In the city program, it was open to anybody.
Yep.
And in the state program, it was open to management employees.
Yeah.
Why?
Because the lawyers said so. Which actually was like, I'm glad you pointed that out, because we really struggled with this. So in another slide further towards the end, I talk a little bit about kind of how I think you engage employees at different levels in this kind of work. I think that there's a lot of professional development and engagement opportunities for senior leadership. I think there is, then you get into like a little bit more leadership, like, professional development for middle management, and frontline workers and junior staff are the ones that I think are in many ways the most excited about professional development and engagement opportunities and don't get them. At the city, the Innovation Academy was open to anyone, and we really encouraged folks in that like 3 to 5 year city service to apply. They're super close to the work. They have great ideas about how things can be done differently. But they also have enough experience that they like understand kind of the city government mechanisms. That was the goal at the state level. And unfortunately, because of some of the constraints around unionized employees, we were unable to figure out a way to allow them to participate in this kind of program, which I think in some ways is like a core irony of maybe why government struggles to implement some of these programs. If you have systems in place that make it really difficult for employees to learn how to be innovative and to create the space to be innovative, how do you become innovative? A lot. Yeah. So we were able to launch the first 2 cohorts with management level employees only that are not union represented. It's something we hope to change in the future, but it was a good flag. Anything else in this area? Okay. Any other ideas or questions or anything anyone wants to say? We can talk about this later too.
I did actually have excuse me, one question from someone online who asked, have you thought of an accelerated class targeted at leadership on the importance of innovation to increase innovation prioritization?
Can you read that to me again?
Yes, I can. Have you thought of an accelerated class targeted at leadership on the importance of innovation to increase innovation prioritization?
We have not thought about a leadership class. I think what we have tried to do is engage leadership. We've engaged leadership, I would say, in small ways around, for example, if someone wants to go through the permit accelerator, their supervisor has to sign off on that participation and has to commit to the fact that like they will create space for that person to not only go to class, but work on their pilot program, work on their pilot project. I think to what we were talking about, work on their pilot project once the course is over. And I think really kind of be supported in their efforts to like implement some of the tools that they're learning. But I think that we probably could do a much better job on like prepping leadership for really what we're trying to do. I think doing something like putting them through a mini accelerator so they have a sense of like what we're trying to do, I think is a great idea. Jackie.
That's what because to you, innovation is a core value. And with state government or any government, what gets measured gets done. So not only might not be a value to them, they go back to their regular job. No one wants to hear it. I'm surprised managers even send the person, that would end up driving you nuts if they're telling you to do it differently. So finding a way to optimize or reward innovation. It's not there anywhere, is it?
No, incentivizing the work is really difficult, like truly incentivize.
I'm sure you've thought a lot about that. So I just wanted to hear
Yeah.
how you were thinking about incentivizing.
So these are great questions that I think like in some ways I actually try to get to in some of these other slides, which makes me feel like I was like on the right path. But yes, I think that, so one of the things that I have learned is innovation is a super core value to me. I think it is like, of course, everyone wants to be innovative. Everyone wants to go through a program like this. Everyone loves Post-its and human-centered design. It's like the greatest thing ever. I mean, it is, a spoiler alert, not everyone feels that way. So I think that we are in this really interesting moment where we also think about how we sell and how we market innovation to different people. So there are some agencies I work with where I roll in there with my Post-its and markers and I say, we're going to do human-centered design and I'm going to make we're going to do game. I'm not a game person. We're going to do like all these activities and it's going to change the way you think. It's going to change the way you work. And they're like, Eliza, let's do it. We have people laughing. We have people crying. It's like a whole vibe. There are other agencies that if I were to say that, they would, couldn't close the door in my face quicker. And I think what I try to do is figure out what's the language, what's the value add that different agencies are going to care about. So I have on one end of the spectrum an agency that's like, I want all the innovation, I want all the Post-its, I want all the human-centered design. On the other end of the spectrum, I have, to Jackie's point, agencies that are like, I care about efficiency and cost savings, and I want you to help me do things faster. And I say, okay, let's do a workshop on process improvement. And it's going to be super business oriented. You're going to walk out of here with like all these optimized outcomes. And I know that I'm essentially doing the same thing, but I'm framing it really differently because each one of those perspectives is really maybe alienating or a turnoff to like the group I'm trying to work with. I've had a lot of conversations doing this work at this exact moment in time too, because I think there has been a lot happening in the government innovation, government efficiency space at the federal level. And at our core, like we are all working towards similar goals of like, how do you make government more efficient, work better? How are we building programs that serve people in better ways? But the way that we talk about that work and the way that we do that work is really different. And I think that the language we use and the tactics we use are super important when we're thinking about outcomes. And I think Permanent Accelerator, there were some agencies that were like, yes, I want my person to go through and like learn all these new tools and, have this great experience. And then there were other agencies that were like, I want this person to go through this program, get their $20,000, build a program that's going to solve this business process that we've been struggling with for years. And it's the same program and the people are learning the same thing, but the perspective on that value add is really different. What's my time? Okay, I have 15 minutes left. Okay, big lessons learned. A lot of people can say no to you. Find the people who can say yes and lean into them. And related to that, I think very similar to what I was just talking about, not everyone gets this work, and that's okay. If I think about folks that have bought into innovation, there's like, and there's going to be people on this tail that you're never going to get. And I think it's when I was starting out in this world, I tried so hard to get all of these people on the tail to care about what I was doing, and you're never going to get them. So you realize quickly that like, you focus on who are going to be your supporters and your allies, and you widen that fold as much as you can. Focus on the people who are going to support you and champion you, and like within reason, leave the ones who don't care behind. Lead with transparency, empathy, and authenticity. These are like my guiding principles. I think this work at its core is really about getting people to trust you. People have to really feel good and feel safe in some ways, being vulnerable about the work that they're doing, how they're struggling, how they want to make it better. And it's super important that I think I always try to remember coming in and doing innovation to many people is scary and threatening. And they think that innovation is about, I'm going to come in and implode all of the way you've been operating, when really I just want to help make it better and easier. But it takes a long time, can take a long time to kind of build that relationship and get people to that point, which relates to number 4, real change takes a long time. I'm sitting in this space now of permit process redesign, which can take years. I'm 2.5 years into this job, and there's one agency that we are still working with very deeply on kind of reimagining process improvement. It's slow. Culture change is slow. I ran the Innovation Academy at the city for probably 5 or 6 years before I was like, okay, like now we know what we're doing. So I think being mindful of that. And then number 5 is super important. There's no right or wrong way to be innovative. I think to me, there's no right or wrong way to be innovative. I have tools and techniques that I teach people. I have frameworks that I think are really helpful. But at the end of the day, I think innovation, it's not about being lean certified. It's not about Six Sigma. It's not about agile. It's about being open to really examining how we operate, how we do things, and just trying to figure out if there's a way to do it better. On that note, these are 4 human-centered design tools that I think are really foundational, very easy to use, and that I implement a lot in my work and that I teach to a lot of the agencies and teams that I work with. Is anyone familiar with Rosebud Thorn, journey mapping, empathy interviews, or decision matrices? Great. Does anyone want to explain any of them, or I can do my like 15-second overview of each one of them? Okay, Rosebud Thorn, super easy. Thinking about the positive, negative, and opportunity elements of a given situation. This is a great tool if you have a situation and you really want to evaluate what's working well, what's not working well, and kind of where are the opportunities where we can think about making things better. This is so fast, and like I don't expect anyone to like super internalize these, but I'm going to teach you anyway. Journey mapping. If you are redesigning any sort of process, I think as we are very quick to be like, I know what the process is. Like I sit in this world every day. When you sit down with a user of a system and you ask them to literally map out the steps that they go through to do X, Y, or Z, your entire perspective shifts and you realize that like people don't do things the way we think they do things. The pain points are not the pain points we think they were. The things that are working well are not the things we thought were working well. Just a really powerful tool to really understand how a system operates. Empathy interviews is just a fancier name for interviewing users, asking a lot of open-ended questions to just really understand how people engage with a system. I think this is probably the tool that folks that go through, especially the Permit Accelerator, find the most value in, is just this idea of sitting down with people that are filling out your permit application, for example, and not making assumptions around the parts where they struggle, but really getting them to tell you the parts where they struggle. And then a decision matrix. Decision matrix is great if you have a bunch of ideas. How can we improve X, Y, and Z? And you generate 25 post-its that all have an idea around how you fix X, Y, and Z. You plot them on a matrix with different factors that you care about. So maybe you want to analyze the cost of something and the impact of something. And you plot all of those ideas. We do post-its and sticky notes on this matrix. So you can say like, this idea is going to cost a lot of money and is also really low impact. So it's probably not something we're going to focus on. This idea is really cheap and really high impact. Like that's the dream, right? We can talk more about any of these afterwards if anyone's interested. This is kind of what I was talking about around how do you kind of sell innovation to different people and engage people at different levels in innovation. Senior leaders, I think at some point you really need senior leaders to be bought into this work if you want to hit kind of that highest level of culture change. These are the people that I think also respond differently to kind of how you talk and sell innovation. But I also think there's a lot you can do without senior leadership buy-in. So depending on what your goals are, take that with a grain of salt. Middle management, folks that that I think really are at that stage in their career or sit in an organization in a space where they strike just that right balance of have leadership and ownership, but aren't at that senior level. They care a lot about having their ideas heard. They care a lot about growth. They're usually just really well positioned to kind of straddle that line between frontline and senior level. So this is, I think, a great place. We've had a lot of good luck like targeting middle management. And then frontline staff, like these are the people that are doing the work that I think day in and day out see how things could be better. They understand people's struggles, they're customer service folks. I think the more you can engage them in solution design, the better. I did it. Sorry, that was a quick end. And now we have time for questions. Officially, the official question slide.
You talked about real change taking a long time, And I'm wondering, in this process, is it people, culture? Which one is the hardest? Is it the people, or is it the culture, or is it the people creating the culture that takes the long time to
Yeah.
change because you can't?
I think people are your biggest barriers and also your biggest champions. So I think people can kind of make or break a process. I would be remiss if I also did not mention that I think part of what makes this work really hard in government are the bureaucratic systems in place. So a lot of what we see at the state level, for example, is there's a central office. Let's take PennDOT. PennDOT's a good example. So we have central office in Harrisburg, which is, PennDOT senior executives and a lot of staff work out of Harrisburg. And then we have district offices. There are 11 district offices across the state. And then there's all the local offices. So like think about where you go here to like get your driver's license. So if PennDOT wants to make a change to a policy, not every policy, but some policies, we have to get approval at the senior level, then at the district level, then at the local level. We have changes that have to be publicized in paper bulletins, and that bulletin has to be out for 60 days. Don't anyone quote me on like any of these specifics. I'm mashing a few anecdotes together here. But there are systems that make it really difficult to make changes to some policies and some programs. But I think most of what takes time is getting people's buy-in and then figuring out what the right fix is. And not putting a Band-Aid solution on something that's going to get a quick win when really something is broken at a much more foundational level. I think a lot about, sitting in the permit world, someone will say, well, this permit is processed on paper. Let's put it online. And that's the fix. But if it's a crappy application and you put a crappy application online, all you've done now is put a crappy application online. You haven't fixed, is it easy to read? Do people understand what you're asking? On the back end, when that application is received, what's the workflow of permit reviewers to get it from point A to point B? If we're not fixing any of that, the fact that you've taken something from paper to digital really doesn't matter. And I think that's what takes a long time.
I was curious, sorry, I'm jumping in here on the questions. Can you talk about like maybe one or two of your like favorite wins? Because obviously you've done this work for a long time. I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, so the disclaimer that I give when people ask me about wins, which I do think is important, is I have interpreted my role in the innovation and transformation space as the person that just builds a framework that allows other people to be innovative. So any of the wins that I claim, like besides something like I am very proud that I implemented the Permit Accelerator. But I think anything that comes out of the Permit Accelerator, for example, like that win belongs to the employee and belongs to the agency. So I just feel that isn't always important for me to say. I think there was a program that we funded in year one of the innovation. We have another program called the Innovation Fund, which I haven't really talked about, but it's a seed fund version that came out of the city. We had someone go through the Innovation Academy from the Department of Parks and Rec, learn all of these like new ways of thinking about his work. He went back to Parks and Rec, and the problem that he had identified was in public spaces like Love Park, back when it was like a park. They used to plant all of these tulips in Love Park, and they'd plant the tulips every spring, and then they'd rip the tulips out like at the end of tulip season and throw them away. And the next year they would buy more tulips to put more tulips in the same spot that the year before they had ripped out these plants. And after kind of learning innovation tools in the Innovation Academy, this employee identified this problem and built a pilot that was essentially, it was called at the time, it was called Plants Make Positive Places. And it was an initiative that allowed the city to basically start a greenhouse to regrow the plants that they kind of consistently were replanting in the same spot. So instead of buying tulips every year, like we already had the tulips and we could replant them, and in some instances, instead of throwing the tulips away, we could redistribute them to like local playgrounds and parks that like also wanted to have flowers. And it was one of the first programs that got funding through this thing called the Innovation Fund. It was taken to scale. It was fully implemented in Parks and Rec. And something we haven't really explicitly talked about was, there's also this relationship between people, place, process, and you want to train people how to be innovative, and then you want them to use innovative spaces, and then you want them to build innovative processes and kind of create this ecosystem. And I think that project, the combination of going through the Innovation Academy, building a pilot, implementing the pilot, having like team meetings in the innovation lab, it was kind of like our ideal, like full circle program. That was a good one. I think you can Google that one, and there's like probably information about it.
Hey, what trends or progress are you seeing that are giving you the most hope and optimism?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think painting with a really broad brush, I don't think people have ever cared more about improving government systems than they do right now. I think we are seeing tons of governments, both at the local level and the state level, invest in transformation efforts at a pace and at a scale that like I have not experienced in my 10 years plus doing this. I think folks are starting with like what we would call administrative burdens. So like permit reform is a really hot topic right now. But I think people are really starting to recognize the value of having a government that just functions well, and all the work that goes into kind of building a government that works for people. So we're seeing folks invest in I would say like people innovators, maybe a little bit more like me. We're also seeing a really big uptick, I think, in tech teams coming into state governments and local governments and building better tech platforms. I think you kind of have to mention AI as part of this conversation, and governments trying to get, I won't say get ahead of, because the pace that technology and AI is moving is so fast, but I think governments are working really hard to try and figure out how we leverage new technology platforms and AI into how we operate. And I've never seen, I think I've just broadly kind of never seen this kind of investment in a way that's really exciting.
Sorry for talking so much.
No, don't apologize.
So I was thinking about how the pitch for the $20,000 to get the funding for the pilot, and I was thinking like if time is an issue, wouldn't a solution be like giving them exposure to it before? And then I was thinking also, there's a lot of like high school students in this city that are like weirdly business focused, in my opinion. Do you have any idea, like, would it be possible to maybe expand the program to also include that portion of the population? Because I know, like, I went to Philly public school, and I think one of like a really big issue we have is like a lot of students don't get career exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think introducing at least students to like these government programs would be able to like expand their idea of what a government can do, skills that they could possess that like would be more universal. So would it be possible, or would there also like, is there a concern of like the bureaucratic processes you were talking before, since it is education and minors and like completely
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think to the first one, yes, I think that like I think part of the solution is, if not, could definitely be like announcing the permit accelerator months in advance, giving agencies the time and the space to like really thoughtfully think about their teams, think about who might want to go through it, so that when they come to the program, they have a better sense of what they want to work on. The first year we did it, we did nothing. The first year we were like, here's your application, build this pilot, come to this program. The second year, I think we did a modified version of that. We let people know probably 6 weeks in advance that they were going to be going through the program, and we tried to set an expectation that they would start to be thinking about their pilot program. I think we could do a much better job about that. I think the other thing that sparks for me is there's also no time bound there's no time bound end point. So like we could also say, within 6 months, your pilot has to be ready for funding. That is not something we've done. I think in regards to your second question, I think any engagement government can do with young people is super important. That's like if I could have a second goal in life, it would be to only talk to like college and high school students and be like, come work for government. I think it's so important and super critical. I think we can definitely broadly speaking, government can definitely do a better job, I think, engaging with young people. And I think the public sector is a really misunderstood place when people are thinking about careers and where they want to work. I'm happy to talk more about government broadly after this. I don't think that the Permit Accelerator or the Innovation Academy per se are the right avenues for that, but I think your head is like in the right place of what does it look like to engage non-government folks in solving government problems. That's something that Chris and I how we met a long time ago was, there was a big hackathons were a big deal. And really this idea of like, how do you bring in external stakeholders to solve public sector challenges? I think recognizing that there are a lot of people who don't work for government that care about fixing things and have skills and have time. So those opportunities are out there. And I think we can do a better job of creating them as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Neha Arnold. Back here. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And then you started to actually answer one of the questions I had, which was really around how does your team and the agency, from your perspective, leverage both academic and industry partners where it makes sense? And then secondly, what role do you see in the future AI playing in fostering that innovation, or maybe helping to expedite some of the challenges or barriers that might exist?
Yeah, I think great questions. I don't think that we do. I think any engagement, I'll just speak from my experience. I think engagement with industry and academics, I think is like very much on a case-by-case basis. I wish that we had kind of more established pathways, especially with higher ed, to really kind of bring research and capacity support into the public sector. I would say, but I think as this like, we're kind of like what I was saying earlier, I think like the moment is now. And even in my role at the state, I think we've had a lot of thought partners and kind of capacity building partners come to us and say like, what are things we can do to support you? I think we don't have the bandwidth in many instances to like do deep dives on like what are other states I'm sit in the permit reform world, so like what are other states doing around permit reform that's working really, really well? Where can we've talked about wanting to do something around like doing line by line analysis of like some of Pennsylvania's regulations in comparison to other states' regulations, to just compare and contrast how we handle different issues. I think those are all things that like we would love, you know, we've like kind of thought about having academic partners support us on. I think the industry question is really interesting. There are a lot of good folks out there doing really good work that I think, like I was saying, want to help solve private sector problems. We do a lot of like piloting and pitching from, you know, especially smaller companies that kind of feel like they have a fix for permit reform or, you know, whatever it might be. So I think the conversations are happening. We have a lot of procurement rules that make it not the easiest thing to just like, let's just work together. But I think we're trying to be better about alleviating some of that red tape and like creating programs that make it easier to build meaningful partnerships with industry. I think AI in government is, I think, like a topic that you could do a whole other session on. I think the challenge is, one of the things that I've experienced is I think the pace of AI is so fast that even non-government sector, like I was just on a call today where we were like, you know, once you feel like you've mastered the latest AI platform, there's another one out there that's doing things better, faster, differently. So I think government is trying to, on the one hand, like catch up with that pace. I think secondly, like other kind of high risk industries, we just have to be really smart and thoughtful about how we use AI. And I think, you know, the stakes of us messing up are really big. And so making sure that we get it right and not just kind of like blindly, you know, jumping into what feels like it's the next big thing. So like AI governance in governments right now is super important. And just thinking about like, how do you standardize and train people to use AI? How do you think about shadow AI? You know, all those things that I think we just have to like figure out solutions for.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us and speaking with us all tonight. This question is more a personal question for you. I just wanted to ask what in particular about your work is fulfilling and what drives you to continue to improve and just push to make everything better?
This is like what I would do a whole talk on. I got my master's in public policy, and I think ironically never thought I would work in the public sector. I like very randomly in 2014 saw a job posting for an innovation program manager at the city, and everyone who I knew was like, you have absolutely no business applying for that job. You don't know anything about innovation or technology. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And I got the job. I think government is like an incredibly misunderstood sector. And unfortunately, most of the time when people are engaging with government, it's like for something not fun. Like no one is like, oh my God, you know what I get to do today? Renew my driver's license or like pay my water bill. But I think the impact of what government does like truly just touches every component of how we move through our community. And I didn't understand that until I started working for the city. And I think that I have never felt more connected really to like my city and my state than when I have been in these roles. And getting to build something and then getting to see it happen like at your local library or like on your street is like a really amazing feeling that is even different than working in a nonprofit and like feeling good about what you're doing. I think government really needs good people right now. And we are sitting in a time where like trust in government is really low. people's perception of government is pretty negative, and I feel really called to just like do whatever I can to change that narrative. And I think if I can talk to one group of people and have one person be like, shit, I didn't know the city or the state was trying to be even remotely innovative. Like, I've done my job. If one person walks out of here and is like, I met this girl who works for government and like she was not that boring, like, great. And I like feel very privileged to do that work.
Thank you so much. Great final question, Michaela. One more round of applause for Eliza. Thank you. So thanks everyone for coming out. Please stay in touch. If you have any questions about entrepreneurship, innovation, et cetera, that we can help you with, don't hesitate. But we have a little more food left and some drinks, so feel free to hang out for a little more and you can answer. Yeah, so if you have other questions, you can ask Eliza directly. Thanks so much.
Oh, also, really quickly, if you did not sign in at the beginning, if you came in a little late, please see me over here so we can get you checked in.